S3 ViRGE. The S3 virtual reality graphics engine ViRGE graphics chipset was one of the first 2D/3D accelerators designed for the mass market. Introduced in 1995 by then graphics powerhouse S3, Inc., the ViRGE was S3's first foray into 3D graphics. The S3/ViRGE was the successor to the successful Tria-64V+. ViRGE/325 was pin-compatible with the Tria-64 chip, retaining the DRAM-framebuffer interface up to 4 MB and clocking both the core and memory up to 80 MHz. In Windows, ViRGE was benchmarked as the fastest DRAM-based accelerator of the era. The VRAM-based version, ViRGE/VX, was actually slower in lower resolutions, but had a faster RAMDAC to support high-resolution modes not available on the 325. Support. Part of S3's marketing plan for the ViRGE included the S3D standard, stating that members of the ViRGE family carried the S3D graphics engine. Games that supported ViRGE directly put this logo on their box so owners of the 3D card would know that it would run as well as possible on their computer. And, despite its lackluster 3D speed, the ViRGE did receive some S3D enhanced games due in large part to the brand prestige S3 carried in this period. Some examples of the ViRGE enhanced versions were Terminal Velocity, Descent Roman 2, Monster Truck Madness, Tomb Raider, Mech Warrior 2, FX Fighter Turbo, Parasite, Pod Incoming, and Jedi Knight. Performance. With the successful launch of the Sony PlayStation home game console, pressure was on the PC market to incorporate hardware that could compete in the area of real-time 3D graphics rendering, something that software-based host CPU rendering could not do well on its own. That is, main CPU software-based rendering could render real-time 3D graphics as demonstrated by games like Descent, which used only the main CPU, and standard VGA hardware to render full-screen 3D video with 6 degrees of freedom motion in real time, but the resolution, polygon count, and quality of shading, smoothing, etc. While the market demand was clearly present, real-time 3D graphics rendering was new and unfamiliar territory for S3 and many of its hardware competitors. With a sizable chunk of ViRGE hardware real estate already devoted to other key functions such as the VGA controller, 2D/bit engine, RAMDAC, PCI and memory interface, and the need to serve traditional 2D applications, the resulting 3D functionality was both limited and slow. When performing basic 3D rendering with only texture mapping and no other advanced features, ViRGE pixel throughput was somewhat faster than the best software-optimized host-based CPU 3D rendering of the era and with better 16 color fidelity. But when additional rendering operations were added to the polygon load such as perspective correction, depth fogging, and bilinear filtering, rendering throughput dropped to the speed of software-based rendering on an entry-level CPU. 3D rendering on the high-end VRAM-based ViRGE/VX988 was even slower than the less expensive ViRGE/325. The upgraded ViRGE/DX and ViRGE/JX models did improve 3D rendering performance, but by the time of their introduction, they were still unable to distinguish the ViRGE family in an already crowded 3D market. Outside of 3D rendering, ViRGE was a solid performer in familiar tasks as DOS VGA and Microsoft Windows. Here, S3's substantial experience in high-performance Windows acceleration showed, with ViRGE benchmarking near the top among competing DRAM-based VGA cards. In OEM PC markets, ViRGE sold well as a direct replacement to S3's highly successful Trio/64 family. The ViRGE family delivered faster Windows acceleration in the same physical footprint as its predecessor. The introduction of competing hardware. S3, along with other previously well-established VGA vendors in the PC market, were unable to adapt to the rapidly evolving PC 3D graphics market. being relegated to sell into market segments where 3D graphics functionality was unimportant. Although the ViRGE sold well in the OEM market, poor direct 3D performance and lack of OpenGL support prevented the ViRGE from competing in the more lucrative 3D graphics segment. Variants. Between its birth in 1995 and retirement near the year 2000, the ViRGE family received regular upgrades. The ViRGE/DX boosted the performance of the original ViRGE/325 by improving perspective correction and implementing a full-speed trilinear filter. The ViRGE/GX added support for more modern SD/SRAM. The ViRGE/GX2 was one of the first VGA chipsets to support AGP, although the level of support extended little beyond electrical compliance. Substantial use of AGP feature set would have to wait until the Savage 3D. The ViRGE was ultimately replaced by the Savage 3D in S3's top-end graphics segment in 1998, which lacks support for the S3D API. However, at least one derivative Tria 3D of the ViRGE remained in production even after the discontinuation of the Savage 3D. Specifications: 64-bit 2D/3D graphics S3 engine with integrated 135 MHz 325 and MX 170 MHz DX/GX/GX2 or 220 MHz VX RAMDAC and clock synthesizers. S3 streams processor for accelerated video, on-the-fly stretching and blending of primary RGB stream and RGB or YUV video secondary stream. Each stream can have a different color depth. Hardware-assisted video playback with horizontal interpolation. Support for Indio, Cinepack, and software and hardware-accelerated MPG-1 video. S3 Scenic Highway for direct interface to live video and MPG-1 peripherals. 2D GUI acceleration. FitBLT, line draw, polygon fill. 3D texture mapping. Perspective correction, flat and garage shading. ViRGE/DX and later, feature parallel processing perspective correction for better performance. Bilinear and trilinear texture filtering, MIP mapping, alpha blending, and video texture mapping. Trilinear filtering is full speed on ViRGE/DX and later, termed smart filter technology. Depth queuing and fogging, see buffering. 1600x1200 with 16 colors VX, 1280x1024 with 256 colors at 75 HC refresh, 1024x768 with 64K colors at 75 HC refresh, 800x616.7 and colors at 75 HC refresh. These are the non-interlaced 64-bit DRAM or VRAM-VX memory interface. 2, 4, and 8 VX might be video memory, single-cycle EDO operation. Glueless PCI 2.1 bus interface and VESA VL bus 325 interface. PCI bus mastering for display list processing and video capture support. Drivers for major operating systems and API Windows 95, Windows 3.1, Windows NT, IBM OS/2 2.1, and 3.0 Warp, ADI 4.2, Direct3D, VRender, RenderWare, and OpenGL. Full hardware and BIOS support for VESA display power management signaling DPMS monitor power savings modes. DDC monitor communications. 325 uses 208-pin PQFP package. VX uses 288-pin BGA package. ViRGE 325-pin compatible with S3 Tria 64V+.